Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. So, in case you missed the announcement over the holidays, like, what, there was anything else going on? I'm proud to announce that this podcast is a flagship publication of the new Progressive Indiana Network. We're adding a massive addition to the Who's Left house, inviting in like-minded Indiana creators and running a new flag up the pole, but Who's Left is still here, and I will continue to publish under that brand name, living as a section within the pinosphere, as it were. Check out some of the work our other contributors are bringing to the table. Good stuff, and there's a lot more where that came from. Now, with that, I do hope this episode has found its way to you through the normal channels with minimal disruption to your listening experience. I apologize if you had any inconvenience. Thank you for supporting us through our growth spurt, gangly awkwardness, and all. So, speaking of awkward, my guest today is, at the time of publishing anyway, currently stranded on a Caribbean island due to U.S. military operations in Venezuela. From the Columbus Repulic, quote, Cinde Wirth, a former Democratic nominee for Indiana's 6th Congressional District, was vacationing in Bonaire, a Dutch island about 50 miles off the coast of the South American country, when she learned Saturday morning that her return flight to the United States had been suspended. End quote. Now, she has family there and was visiting for the holidays, and fortunately, she does already have a flight booked and will be returning home soon. Personally, an inconvenience; internationally, a giant can of worms. But today's conversation isn't about any of that. Recorded a couple weeks ago, in the before time, the long, long ago, in this conversation, we talked to the scientist, teacher, small business owner, and freshly minted PhD who is running for Congress for the third time in Indiana's 6th District. We'll talk about her diverse career in science, education, and business, as well as her experiences as a staffer on Capitol Hill, where she has already written and shepherded legislation through to passage, which is more than many of our current congresspersons can say. And in this desperate time when we need to swing for the fences, we talked about the need for bold policies like Medicare for all and a public jobs program to address things like social entropy and economic inequality. Real quick, before we get to the interview, I do have a big ask. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't sell out to advertisers, and we don't have billionaire benefactors. And hey, now we have more mouths to feed. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to gatekeep valuable information in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. You can also still make a one-time contribution to me on Cash App or Venmo. Links are in the show notes. And look, I get it. The holidays left your budget stretched tight. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. You get me next time, all right? Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please, join us. Follow on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network is at its full spelled out name on most social media sites, but on X, Blue Sky, and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please give us a follow over there. Could really use your help growing the new project. Tell the others. Follow us wherever you're at. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, here is my conversation with Cinde Wirth. All right. Hey, Cinde Wirth. Welcome back to the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you.
So, hey, since the last time you were here, big developments. I understand you just completed your doctorate.
I did. I received my PhD in educational studies from Ball State on Saturday, and they put the velvet stole around me and took my picture and said congratulations. And I have officially climbed every mountain you can climb in academia as a first generation college student.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Save some for the kids behind you, right? No. Congratulations. That's very impressive. I mean, listen, first time I had you here, I wrote in the notes after the show, like how impressive you were. Like, oh man, Cindy's a very, very smart person. We need to talk to her more. And yeah, you didn't even need the piece of paper to prove it, but now you got the piece of paper to prove it.
I think when you've had things said to me that I've had said to me, that piece of paper sometimes is a good thing to have in your back pocket, not just for yourself, but for people who say, you need more experience. You're not enough of this. You're not enough of that. That cannot be said any longer. I mean, I was a student who was told I wasn't exactly college material.
Wow.
So, I am.
Prove them wrong. Yeah. I guess. And then some. So, hey, since not everybody that's listening to this or watching us will have caught your first appearance on our show. So let's fill some folks in and introduce you. Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Cinde Wirth. My formal name is Cynthia, but I go by Cindy. I'm a scientist. I'm a teacher. I started off a small business owner when I finished my first round through college as an undergraduate. So I have worn many hats, and for many reasons. Most of those is because it was something that was needed. I needed to fill some role that, and so I've worn a lot of hats along the way doing that. And I take some shots about that, but I'm very proud of all of the things that I've done. And I think my resume speaks for itself that there's not a challenge that I've ever backed down from.
And you have this broad array of experience. I mean, sure, especially like you go to Congress, everybody's a friggin' lawyer, right? I mean, we got enough lawyers in Congress, and frankly, enough business people too. We need scientists and educators and, tradespeople. We need a wide variety of knowledge in there that I think we're generally lacking, and people that have within them of a diverse array of experience as well. I think that's important.
I think so too. I was fortunate enough to spend a year on Capitol Hill as a fellow, and what I saw was that my skill set is valuable there. The things that I've experienced, the things that I happen to know about, those odd little things I've run across in the scope of the work that I've done, either to help put food on our table or raise our kids, is needed because there are just strange things that if you know something, it's very helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are running for Indiana's 6th congressional district, and we just had some drama in the state house. I suppose it's nice to know that the 6th congressional district remains the same as it was.
It does. That was a really stressful event. I am so proud of Indiana standing up to what was being, forced upon us. And Hoosiers showed up and said, no, we're not doing that. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean we have to do it too. So we have 11 counties in the 6th district. Not all 11 counties are full counties. We have 3 partial counties. So it's the northern 2/3 of Bartholomew, the southern part of Randolph, the lower third of Marion County, and all of Johnson, Shelby, Hancock, Rush, Henry, Fayette, Wayne, and Union.
You almost had a little melody going there. I heard the Animaniacs song starting, But so I mean, it that really is a testimony to for all the celebration and the victory, and again, it was good to stand up to the bullying from President Trump, but we're still playing on a map that is carving communities up for political gain, right?
It does. I mean, when you look at the fact that we have Richmond, Indiana, the southern part of Indianapolis, Columbus to the south, Greenwood, and then a lot of rural farming communities in between, it still is not the perfect district, but it is what we know. It is what people have expected, and it is what was decided on in the last redistricting after 2020, when we had completed the last census, the way it's supposed to be.
Yes, and drawing maps for political purposes is one thing, and yes, our maps are currently gerrymandered, but they're not as incredibly offensive as this proposal that they were debating. So, listen, this is your third go around.
This will be the third round. The first time, I was never planning on running. I was going to wait until I finished my doctorate to run. So this is actually the first time I was supposed to have run. Why did I before? We had one person running in 2022 who was over 85 years old, who wanted to dismantle NATO, and there was no one else who would run. And so at the last minute, I was asked, and I said, well, I wasn't really planning on it. I'm in the middle of doing a doctorate, but okay. So I did take a little bit of time off and, focused just on the campaign, and did pretty well in 2022 as a first-time candidate with a new district, a brand new district. So I came back in 2024. There was no other person signed up to run at all. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it again. So this will be the third time. Really, the first time I was supposed to be running.
So yeah, I mean, I guess let me ask about that. After having done this twice before, what makes you want to climb back on this horse again? Is it because you feel like you didn't get a chance to really give it your full effort the first couple times?
No, we gave it our full effort. Like I said, I took time off, from what I was doing, to solely focus on it, and gave it everything. And that's what I had promised, that I would do, and I did. So I'm very proud of what I've done before. In fact, there's some organization that did give me some kind of a kudos for producing the most point gain for the least amount of money spent across the nation, which, as somebody who will fight furiously for campaign finance reform and taking big money out of politics and ending Citizens United, that meant a lot to me. So I started running because what I saw in my classroom when I was teaching high school were kids from families who were struggling. And I saw policies that our elected officials kept voting for weren't helping my students or their families. And in 2017, I was teaching environmental science. And part of that, I was a project-based learning teacher. So I developed all of my curriculum according to state standards, but through projects. One of the projects that we did with our seniors was they had to go through the history of labor protections and environmental protections, things like OSHA and the EPA, things like that. Like, what are they? What are included in them? Why do we have them? What led to them? And in the middle, and looking at things like the Cuyahoga River on fire, and students today have never seen things like that, and they're usually really shocked. And then they find out about DDT accumulating in bird shell eggs, and bird eggshells, and that we almost lost bald eagles. And they're like, but we see them all the time. And then, I say, well, when I was a kid, we didn't. So that was really impactful. And at the same time, in 2017, we were watching the EPA being systematically dismantled. And so a couple of students, they were like, why is this happening? Can you do anything about this? And honestly, I didn't know. I said, and I told them, I don't know if I can do anything or not. We also tried writing our own laws for Indiana to do things like overturning Governor Pence's ban on banning plastic bags in city and municipal areas. And I'm very careful of how I say that because it's tricky wording. But the project was called Ban the Bag, Ban, Ban. Yeah. Anyway, and what we found out was nobody really knew how to write laws that we encountered in Columbus, Indiana. Me as a teacher reaching out to the people I knew, how does this happen? We didn't know. So in the course of that project and students, asking me what I could do, I stumbled upon a fellowship to Capitol Hill to learn to write policy and how laws are made and those kinds of things, specifically for science and technology, engineering, and math teachers, called the Albert Einstein Educator Fellowship. So the night before the applications were due, I filled out the application, got all the things written that I needed written, and somehow squeaked through as one of 14 fellows from across the nation, and had no idea most people apply 4 or 5 times. Just kind of, I just really didn't know much about it, but it looked really interesting, and it was incredible. So, and I went the next year. So I applied that fall, and I was in DC the next fall. So it's a quick, wow. it's a quick turnaround. But I was in Jared Polis's office first. He's now governor of Colorado, but he was a U.S. representative from Colorado, 2nd District. And when I was there that fall, the entire office took a leave of absence and went back to Colorado to try to elect him governor. But they left me in the office. I mean, they said, you can come with us. And I was like, well, I'll just stay here. Somebody's got to be here. And they said, well, there's a little project we'll have you do. Can you make this bill go? And I said, sure. So it was about the 19th Amendment, establishing a monument to women's voting rights from a Colorado sculptor. And I met with her and her team, and I made this bill go. I didn't know at the time, again, kind of like I applied for this fellowship, I didn't know at the time that most bills don't ever go anywhere. So, I was sent on a fool's errand, and I got it done. So I got the bill, introduced it. Then Congress ended, and the House flipped. So the new incoming congressman was Joe Neguse from the 2nd District. I was not quite established into my new office with Eddie Bernice Johnson from Texas 30. Jasmine Crocker took her place. So I was actually working out of the Library of Congress during the government shutdown. That's why I wasn't in my new office. And I got a call that said, hey, Cindy, we don't have access to all that stuff you did with that bill. I'm in Joe Neguse's new office, but I'm the only staffer that went. Can you redo this and send it to me? So I redid the bill, repackaged it. I had to rewrite enough of it that it could be reintroduced. And Joe Neguse saw that bill all the way through and passed it, I think 2 days before the world shut down for COVID at the end of February.
Oh, wow. So that one kind of got lost in the shuffle, huh?
No, actually it was passed under, there were a bunch of bills that were passed on voice vote. And I flew to DC and sat in the gallery and watched it pass. It was pretty incredible. And then it passed the Senate that December of 2020. And 5 years ago tomorrow, in December of 2020, it was signed into law.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I meant to say it like it didn't get the attention it deserved with all that other COVID and whatnot going on, right?
Well, COVID kind of hadn't, like, everybody was still ignoring it. And I was in DC. Actually, I was in Eddie Bernice Johnson's office. The day that it passed was the day that Joe Biden was sort of made to be the main candidate for the presidential election. And she told our chief of staff, because her office was the last one I was in, And she knew I was in the office and that I had watched the bill pass because I made her sign on to that bill. And she, of course, did, happily. And she told the chief of staff to not to let me leave because she wanted to talk to me. And so I spent about, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours in her office that day with her, talking to her. So we hadn't quite shut down for COVID yet. She was a nurse. So we had some really robust conversations about viruses and particle sizes and masks. And, it was that early on in COVID. So.
Yeah, and that's before anybody really knew and began to even think about that sort of stuff. Like we were still asking those questions. We were wiping down groceries.
Yep. It was. So yeah, it was, I guess you could say I caught the bug because once I saw how the mechanics of it all worked, and I had already spent a year looking at, how policy is developed. And I got to see, when I was in her office, she was the first female chairwoman of the Science Space Technology Committee. And that was pretty incredible to be in her office at that time. So I would sit in the hearings of the Science Space Technology Committee, and I would listen. I would look at the issues. I would read. I would access the Congressional Research Service for more background on things that I wanted to know more about, like our National Science Foundation, where a lot of our science programs came from, things like that. And then I would look at, where we were today and other legislation that was out there, other reports that were coming from National Science Foundation and other organizations, the AAAS, American Academy of Science. And you can start to see that there's holes in our policy where we can write good policy to kind of fill those in, whether it's tax things for students that would help them. I wrote a bill on that. And that was scored by the Congressional Budget Office in a way that made me kind of shake my head because it was much more expensive than what we had kind of figured out it would be. So I said, well, how did you get that number? And they're like, oh, it's proprietary. But should it be?
Well, anything done by Congress should be
right. Transparent.
Available to the democratic process.
So I learned a lot of things. Just little things like that. But I wrote some other bills on promoting and providing instructional support for K-12 STEM programs. And then I worked a lot on coordinating and planning and implementing a very large Congressional Black Caucus program for the Congresswoman for more than 300 middle school and high school students from DC, Virginia, and Maryland, where we brought in scientists, engineers, and even astronauts, plus the first female pilot from American Airlines, just all kinds of cool people. But what we did was we brought them in to be panelists, but then the students got to ask questions, but then the students got to talk to them, and they could wait in line as long as they wanted to talk to these people one-on-one. And it was pretty incredible to be part of that. So I experienced firsthand the power of a congressional office and how it can change everyday people's lives, especially students. If that congressional office and the staffers care more about their constituents and voters and the people of their district than they do about padding their stock portfolios. And that made a huge impression, and that's why I continue to run.
That's great stories, and certainly, it's nice that sending you to Washington, you don't have to learn that bill writing process. There's so much such a steep learning curve, I imagine. And, it seems like our side, our folks actually have to learn that process. Whereas on the right, they have these bills served up for them on a silver platter by organizations like ALEC,
Yes, they do. They absolutely do. That was one thing that I learned about. I got to go to the National Council of State Legislatures office. And when we were in there, my whole fellowship was in there. So we were from 15 different states. And guess who was the example of ALEC and all of the bill mills? It was Indiana. And it was like, oh, Cindy, you're from Indiana. Well, guess what? So this bill, like everything that was going through the state legislature in 2019, when I was at National Council of State Legislatures, was Indiana was the example.
Yeah. Wow. David Pepper in his book, Laboratories of Autocracy, talks about this a lot. Not necessarily, specifically to Indiana. He's from Ohio, and they get it just as bad as we do. And states like Arkansas, all these, quote unquote red states, they have these bills served up to them, to our legislators. They don't write their own bills. They tweak it a little bit for this state and a little bit for this state, and they see what gets through. And whatever one they can find some thin legal veneer for, and it makes it through a rigged legislature, and in some cases a rigged state Supreme Court. Then hey, we've got a hook. We're going to run that back in all these other states too.
That's exactly how it happens. When I learned that, I was just shocked, because the job of being a representative and a legislator is finding those holes where you can serve people and make their lives better, instead of pushing whatever agenda that billionaires and multimillionaires have decided that they want.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of things we've learned, you talked about the learning curve for bill writing, and he's talking about learning the shenanigans that Republicans get up to. What have you learned from your first two runs? I guess what do you know now that you wish you had known then?
I'm not sure if it's anything I didn't really know, but it's been kind of reinforced, that Hoosiers do really value hard work and autonomy, as well as authenticity. So those three things, Hoosiers don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And we saw that last week, because whether you have an education at the university level or not, we're all intelligent people. We're all capable of critical thought. We're all capable of doing a lot of things that, quite frankly, sometimes just gets dismissed, and assumed that we can't, even though we can. And I'm a big proponent of that, where I think anybody can do anything that they really put their mind to. And I think education is great. Our public education system has been world class, and we need to retain that. But I think, the more I'm in the 11 counties listening to what people need and getting to know the communities, the more that it's apparent that, authenticity is just the key to this. And that's what really Hoosiers value. You need to be who you say you are. You need to be authentic. You need to, really care about this. If you don't, you're doing this for the wrong reasons. If you're doing this to pad your stock portfolio or to be a celebrity or, whatever else it is, that's the wrong reasons. Voters know, and they can tell. They know that billionaires and the 1% across the nation right now have more than 93 to 95% of the rest of us. And Hoosiers see this because over half of our salaries and our wages are going to housing. The rest is going to food and transportation and medical costs. And it's really not a lot left over. In some cases, there is none left over. And I think about 30% of the people in the working class are living below that level. And they are in the hole at the end of the year by like $2,800 at least.
And meanwhile, your current representative in Congress, Mr. Jefferson Shreve, is worth some odd $600 million, depending on the day. His portfolio fluctuates more depending on the market in one day than many of us make in a year. And yet, he is right there, and his stock portfolio is growing as he is able to access insider information in Congress.
It is. And those laws need to be changed. I don't fault anybody for being successful or making money. I mean, that's perfectly fine. I think when you get to the point where you have no idea what it's like to have more month at the end of your money, maybe you're not the best person to represent people who are living that way every day. And I think, I think that's important. My husband's lost 3 jobs in the course of 6 years, not for anything that he's done. In fact, he's in sales and he was doing very well. It's the way that companies are structured right now, because if you do well in sales, they have to pay you a commission. That makes their bottom line look bad at the end of the year. And, we've been self-employed for 20 years before this. So this was new to us that, that this can happen. So, I mean, he's in a good spot now, but we know what that's like. We're still climbing out of that last hole that, that we were in. And in 2008, we lost our entire business to the flood. 16 years worth of work, 7 days a week.
Oh man.
Just washed away. So we know what that struggle is like. I started teaching because we didn't have health insurance, and there weren't a whole lot of jobs. If you remember, in 2008, the economy was not in great shape. So I was able to get a teaching license and started teaching. I had been at IU doing some adjunct work, but there's no benefits with that. And so so I started teaching high school because they gave me the same schedule as my kids. We had health benefits. We went for 2 years without insurance before I was got a full-time job. So I know the struggle. And we just came off of, again, the marketplace insurance last year. And I'm looking at those premiums that we were on last year that are going to be coming in January. And there's millions of people who are facing this. It's just incredible that we haven't solved this problem that we know how to solve. And all we have to do is look to all of our friends across the world who have this, Medicare for all. It's not rocket science. It's good policy. It's good taking care of our citizens.
Well, I'm glad you pivoted to policy for me, because I want to talk about big things. Excuse me. So, we obviously, with the Trump administration being as extreme as it is in engaging in all of the illegal activities daily. I mean, pick a day, you've got a new impeachable offense. So I guess how to dig out of this thing, we've got to think big. And I think a lot of Democrats are paralyzed, maybe timid, maybe they think, or they're afraid to go big because they think that will scare folks. It makes them unelectable or whatever. And I'm over here thinking, listen, you don't dig out of fascism by half measures, and certainly we're going to have to do something bold to make sure we don't get to this point again. So you mentioned Medicare for all. That's a big thing that I think is mandatory for any Democrat to support going into the 2026 election. I mentioned Trump being a walking impeachment case every day. If Democrats can take the House in 2026, should we be thinking about impeachment on like day one of the next Congress?
I would think that would happen. Yes. I mean, I was in DC when articles of impeachment were given out by Representative Green the first time. Al Green, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I remember I made an impeachment cobbler and took it to the office. I'm on my bicycle, no less, because I rode my bike every day. Yeah. So I think that if the House does flip, yes, I think that will happen on day one. I would not be surprised if things don't start changing in January with the pushback. And I think Indiana might have kicked something off last week, because across the nation, we're seeing more people start to stand up to things that are going on that we know is wrong. I mean, when we know something's wrong, just because somebody's doing it doesn't make it right. And we all know this. We learned it. My oldest is a kindergarten teacher. We learned this in kindergarten or before. And I think we all know that. I think it's just having that first, whoever it is, stand up to what's going on, and then making it so that other people have the courage to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said
very
something
much
about like making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But I've thought a lot about that. I've read a lot about what happened in World War II, what led up to World War II. I read a lot about women's roles in how World War II ended, and the intelligence that was gathered, and all those kinds of things. It's fascinating. So what I came away with and I am pretty much a systemic thinker. I mean, I'm a biologist. I look at systems, whether they're natural systems. Everything's interconnected everywhere. And when you take things out in isolation, something gets lost. So I think that none of these programs, social safety nets, democracy itself, are immune from what's called social entropy, where, entropy is kind of when things fall apart kind of naturally, unless you invest energy or put something into that system. And I think this works the same. And they call it social entropy. So if we aren't investing energy and education into these programs that help people, like Medicare for all, a good immigration system that works, that actually functions. And we've had several bills proposed that could have done that, but were shot down for political reasons. So whatever gains we make in the near future, or whatever gains that we still are able to hold on to today, those could just as easily slip away without putting in this energy and investment back into protecting this. And I think, it only takes a few generations, I think, for that to happen. So, but you talk about big thinking too. And I mean, it is big thinking and it's aspirational thinking, but in reality, it's thinking smaller. It's putting people's needs before other needs, and making sure that everybody's taken care of. And so I think you can kind of think of it two ways. It is big thinking, but it's also thinking about individual people and ending that dehumanization, that level of dehumanization that is so prominent today. And I think, we can look to the past of how we solve these. The solutions we've had in the past, they weren't perfect. They might not have been elegant. They might not have been the best, but perfect is the enemy of the good. And even when we're looking at our data today, we've got to be thinking 10 steps ahead, not just what's the next move, because we're more than playing chess. And I think at the moment, we're all still playing checkers and chess, but the other side might be playing dodgeball.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. Yeah, they're not. That's not the thing. They're not playing thinking games anymore. They're playing doing games. Yeah. So, well, you mentioned the generations and this concept of social entropy, which I find fascinating. You say it only takes a couple generations, and I think it takes about 4. If you know the work of William Strauss and Neil Howe and the generations, and it takes about the length of one human one good long human lifetime for these systems that we put in place to kind of corrode. And it's like they we keep coming back to this, or they come back to a quote from a British historian, Arnold Toynbee, who's like, when the last man who remembers the last great war dies, the next great war is inevitable. And even if you take war out of the context, if you look at FDR and the New Deal and the social safety nets and the systems we built, and then internationally after World War II and NATO and the United Nations and this regime of international cooperation, which it didn't always work great. Don't get me wrong, but we had had the right idea, at least on paper. And over the generations, kind of forget those lessons. Maybe we can deregulate the banks and let them go off on a tear again. It's okay. It'll be fine, right? Or maybe maybe NATO's not necessary. Maybe it's costing us too much money. Why are we in these other countries, right? So our system has entropied over these last several generations, and we're now in that crisis generation where we have to build the next system, right? We have to put the pieces in place. We have to build the next big thing. So if Cinde Wirth is putting together the next big thing, the next big bold, what's Cinde Wirth's New Deal look like, right? We talked about Medicare for all. What else is in there?
So, and again, that's a big question, but it goes back to, what do people need? And I think that was the same question that FDR was dealing with. What do people need? So if we have a government of everyday people focused on what everyday people need, or in some cases want, jobs, relief, public works, and not just tax benefits for the wealthy as we're seeing pushed through today. We could have a more modern version of what we've seen in the past: public jobs programs, rebuilding roads, rebuilding bridges. We've seen a little bit of that with the Infrastructure Act. And that was a huge shot in the arm to the whole country, which is starting to, again, we're seeing that social entropy. It's kind of coming down. But clean energy, social insurance, Medicare for all, labor protections, all of those things that make life better, give people breathing room, give people a quality of life that is we haven't seen for several decades. That's what the America that I think, when I go out and talk to people, that's what they want. And it's maybe not getting something back, but making something even better. So I was fortunate enough to be one of the first people to read the new Green Deal when it came out. And when I was in one of the hearings, because I was, of course, attached to the Science-Based Technology Committee, I think it was Ami Bera, who was a representative, who talked about aspirational policies and legislation versus how you get there policies and legislation. And I think that's where we are today. But I think it's even more critical that we head toward those aspirational policies even more so, because we're in a place where people are in dire straits and our climate is in dire straits. No matter who wants to say it's not, it is. And we're seeing that. The bridge between a big part of Washington state and Seattle just washed out today.
Oh my, yeah, I know there was a lot of bad floods up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're seeing, weather patterns shift. We're seeing people with nowhere to live. We're seeing, people's cost of living going so high they can't make ends meet anymore. And so at this critical juncture, we're there. And so no longer do we have to look at these as aspirational. We need to look at these as practical solutions, because fiscally, in the long run, it's going to be cheaper if we just do it now.
Always, always. Listen, I work in trades, and if you let a leak keep going, it's gonna cause a lot more damage in the
Yeah.
long run. You need to take care of that stuff now, and like all the warning signs are flashing bright red. But okay, like we need to do big things. We need Medicare for all. We need like a federal jobs program that's doing things like climate mitigation or oh man, hey, building high-speed rail. We talk about the crisis in masculinity, right? Like the young men want purpose, right? Give them something to do. They love trains. They want to build trains. We want high-speed rail. We want to build windmills, and we want to build solar farms, and we want to build offshore wind. Like that. We want to. There are things we can be doing, and people say, "Oh, it's too expensive," right? And like you said, it's too expensive not to do these things. And if you give people jobs, it's not like they're you know, fattening up and sitting on a pile of money like Scrooge McDuck. It goes right back into the economy.
It does. It really does. Um, Again, we're back to those interdependent systems. Everything is interconnected. I mean, even a food web, needs this constant energy to stay alive, and that's kind of what we're building. We've got to be self-sustaining. There's got to be some kind of a kickstart. You've got to put some energy in, um, and I think big systems like governments and economies will drift toward that, that entropy. So we do have to put stuff into them. I think we have waited so long now, especially, with our wage stagnation.
Mhm.
It's going to be more difficult because we have waited so long to make some of these decisions. And we do need people who will stand up and say, this is the right thing to do. It may not benefit the ultra wealthy, but it's going to benefit people who are not wealthy, people who are struggling, people who really need something. And I think that we have been in a place in our country that is focused on dehumanization, and for example, we distribute food to the needy. They don't shop
Mhm.
for it. So there's an element of control that people who are wealthy like to retain. Why? I've always wondered that. Like, why? Why can't, if you
Oh.
need food, why can't you shop for? Why can't you choose your food? Why does poverty and joblessness and hard times require this absolute dehumanization and every shred of dignity be removed from people or families who are going through this? It's something I have never understood. Um, and I don't know if there's some psychological reason for it with power and all of that kind of things. But I think it's time in the US that we shift our thinking, um, to a position where we acknowledge the absolute humanity of every individual in our country. And by absolute, I mean it in the term that we all learned it in middle school math, where that sign was on either side of the number, and it didn't
Yeah.
matter if it was positive or negative. It just was that whatever, that entity inside it. And I think if we go back to this absolute humanity, um, when you're looking at a representative government, if that's the philosophy that is taken about representing people, that's how you serve people.
Yeah. And because right now we've been serving special interests, right? We've been serving the
Yes.
powerful, we've been serving the wealthy, and you get a situation where it's like a game of Monopoly. Which Listen, good branding. They've good marketing. They've got themselves a nice product there. People seem to like it. Monopoly is a terrible game. And when it goes on, and you got one guy has all the money, and everybody else is just barely getting. But they just want it to end. And what you need is you feed money into the bottom of the system to keep the game going. Otherwise, it's no fun for anybody.
And I think, wasn't that why the woman designed it, was to illustrate how it gets out of hand?
Yeah. The original game definitely got tweaked when Parker Brothers bought it.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think part of this goes back to public education. So public education is the foundation of a good, strong, thriving democracy. And when we have a well-educated public, from public education, we have people who are able to fill roles, who are able to make decisions, who are able to kind of tease out what's really going on. And I think that's really important. And we have also undermined that. And I think when public education started to fall is when things started falling faster.
Yeah, and it has been a decades-long plan to undermine public education. For various reasons. You've got folks that are in it for the racism. Like school vouchers. We were just talking about this the other day, and the history where those came from, and the backlash to Brown versus Board of Education. Then you have like the libertarian property extremists who are just like, well, the state shouldn't do anything. Everything should be privatized. But this is one of those things. You said we have to look to our friends in the rest of the world and the way they do things. And our Nordic friends have very well funded public education systems, and they do very well. They have fully funded healthcare systems, single payer, have better outcomes for lower costs too than we do. And in a way, that's just like it's American exceptionalism. It's toxic American exceptionalism. It's what we know best. Might makes right. We don't need to learn from anybody else. We just kick ass. Learning, that's for the weak. And then a couple generations of that entropy, social entropy. And educational entropy, critical thinking entropy, and then you get a society that is susceptible to a strongman like Donald Trump. Now, say what you want about the guy, but he knows how to go maximum, right? If you look at Project 2025, they're doing the thing, right? They are going hard. They're codifying Christian nationalism. They're about halfway through the thing already. It's very scary. Again, we have to unwind that and then think of something new. So you mentioned being aspirational earlier, right? What's our big thing? We're I think enslaved by the what is possible, right? We think, oh well, we can only do this thing, or oh, that's too big. Well, if you don't go for the big thing, you're not going to get the half measure. If you start asking for the half measure, you might get a crumb.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and I like I asked about Medicare for all. I asked about big federal jobs guarantees and stuff like that. What's another big thing that you're thinking about?
I think the American people have kind of lost the plot of the basis of the United States. And I think we need to dial that back. Because, I mean, at the moment, we have multimillionaires and billionaires making tone-deaf decisions about our everyday lives. They have no idea what we're going through, or they don't care. But when they're making decisions on behalf of people who can't pay the electric bill, don't have anywhere to live, or have to put groceries back on the shelf because they don't have enough in their wallet to pay for it, that's where we've lost the plot. Where we can change things, where we can go forward, is by starting where we live, who we live beside, who's our community, and then just scaling that up little by little. It's not going to be immediate, but I think we've already done a lot of the work. I think in our technological world, we have isolated ourselves, and I think we're realizing that that isn't how we really all want to live. People are sort of yearning for community. And I see this when I go out into the 11 counties, when there's something to show up for, people will show up. And that's really, really exciting. So I think if we meet and talk to our neighbors, build those relationships, bring that sense of community back, handshake by handshake, literally, I mean, handshake by handshake. This is how we build those mutual resilient systems of support. And we become connected to each other again, because through those connections, that's where we have power. And that is our power in the United States. That is the plot. That's kind of what we've lost. When we build those community connections back, people are more likely to show up to vote in local elections. They're more likely to know candidates, back candidates, understand, who would be a good candidate and who's really out for just 5 minutes of airtime, who will have their back. And just like we saw in the last few weeks with Hoosiers showing up to stand strong against redistricting in our state, we can do that on an ongoing basis. And that's what representative government really is about. It's about community. It's about what's best for all of us. It's about taking care of those who are in need and being willing to give up a little bit of what we have to make sure that somebody else is taken care of. And I think that rhetoric and that false narrative of somebody's taking my stuff and they didn't earn it, that's part of that dehumanization. And we really need to reframe how we talk about things like that, how we look at people who are in need instead of villainizing them, looking at them with compassion. And the Christian nationalism, or the nationalist Christians, the Nazis, nationalist Christians, they always want to bring Christianity and the Bible into it and Jesus into it. But Jesus didn't say feed the poor if they bring you a bill that has their address on it, shows and proves that they live in the community, and pass a drug screen.
Right.
He just says, help the poor, feed the hungry.
So
we need to really pay attention to what are we really doing, and who's really behind, who's really spearheading what's going on, because most of us don't agree with what's really going on. When we're snatching people off the streets, and we've got everyday citizens carrying whistles, and I mean, have you heard the whistle tapes? It's incredible. And this is because of community. And I think we're seeing it. I think we're ready for it. I think people just have to be brave enough to say, I want to be a part of a community that is a good, supportive community where people love their neighbors. People don't care where you were born, what language you first spoke, or what color your skin is. They're your neighbors. They're Americans. They're here. We need to take care of each other.
Yeah, really. So, going big and fixing these big interconnected systems, really, it sounds like starts with realizing that we are interconnected and we need each other first.
Well, I mean, it is. It goes like this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. But it starts with we the people.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Well, where can the people of Indiana find out more about you, Cinde Wirth, and your campaign?
So we are on socials. It's either WIRTH 4 or a C at the beginning for Cindy, C Wirth 4 Congress. And depending on the socials, we may or may not have had that handle. So that kind of varies a little bit. And then the website is WIRTH 4 Congress.com, which is on the screen. If you Google it, as long as you spell WIRTH right, you'll usually find me. At least I can find me. So you can find me there. And this is now my mostly full-time job. We still do have a small business, but I can balance that. I don't have to raise kids anymore. They're grown. So
Yeah. They are a full-time job, to be sure, and it's I'm excited to see what you can do with this campaign now that you can now that you have the experience, that you've done this a couple times, and you can really. I said at first like you couldn't give it your all, but you gave it your all. But it's like now you're ready. Now you are ready, and I'm excited to see that, and I think the people of Indiana are excited to see that too.
I am ready. I know the ropes, I know the roads, and I think I know every back road. Going on in your community. And if you're not sure what's going on, reach out to us or reach out to your local Democrat Party. Usually there are people there. Indivisible is another organization. If you don't want to get partisan politics, Indivisible is an incredible organization, as is the League of Women Voters.
Mhm.
And Indivisible and League of Women Voters are two organizations that I think are just incredible that we have in the United States. And so if you're wanting to get involved with anything, any of those avenues, or reach out to us.
Fantastic. Well, Cinde, so many things, so many big systems we need to talk about. We barely scratched the surface, so I'd love to have you back to talk about all of these things again anytime. Looking forward to that. But for now, thank you very much for joining me here on the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, that was Cinde Wirth, scientist, educator, small business owner, and a recently minted PhD, running for the U.S. House of Representatives in Indiana's 6th Congressional District. As we speak to more federal candidates throughout the year, I'll continue to press them to forward big, bold, visionary ideas like some of the concepts we discussed here today. We are in too deep to dig our way out of this thing with a spoon. All right. That's it for now. I will be back this Sunday, as I am every weekend, with Who's Left This Week on YouTube, Facebook Live, and at the source at progressiveindiana.net. Indiana's most thorough weekend Sunday news and politics talk show. It is a lot of fun if you can call following the news in this timeline fun. My panel and I go around the corn to cover all of the week's top Indiana news stories and look at U.S. and international happenings through Hoosier lens. I hope to see you there in the comments. We need help combating the trolls. But if you can't make it live, the program will be available for download later Sunday afternoon. Thanks once again to Cinde for this interview, and thank you for listening. One last reminder to please consider contributing to this project with a paid subscription at whosleft.us, or even better, at progressiveindiana.net. where you will still find my entire archive. We rely solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Anyway, in addition to the website, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at HoosLeft.us, and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at HoosLeft. Send me a DM at any of those sites with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. While you've got the old email machine out, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.